just wanted to end with three remarks, really. I began by saying that Brand Finance has been in business for 30 years, and for the immediate 2 years before that, I worked for Interbrand, who are a brand consultancy, and we had a good time. It was fun. And their founder was called John Murphy. I don't know whether anybody's ever met John Murphy, but he was a very funny guy. It was a pleasure to work with him. And his wife was a clinical psychologist, and he used to talk a lot about him and his wife going to dinner parties, doing crosswords and all this kind of thing before he created Interbrand. And one of the things he was very struck by was practical jokes. And you've probably heard of housemaid's knee, which is sort of, I think it's water on the knee from going around scrubbing the floor and all that kind of thing. And then going on from there, there's a thing called fiddler's elbow. So when you play a fiddle, you get something wrong with your elbow. It's a sort of like tennis elbow. And he and his wife once, when they were a bit drunk after a dinner party, decided that they would do something similar. So they invented a thing which they called cello crotch. Has anyone ever heard of cello crotch? Well, apparently they wrote this short paper which they submitted to the Lancet. And to their amazement, it got published. And he said that they thought about telling the Lancet that it was a joke that they did when they were drunk, but they were too scared to. So in the end, they left it. They thought, oh, never mind, it'll die a horrible death. However, various keen academic researchers at AMC's sort of picked this story up and decided that they would go further into researching cello crotch. And he told me, he wrote an autobiography, which he came and presented at Brand Finance about 5 years ago. And he said it just went on and on. And in the end, there were like 6 additional papers that had been done by PhD students to prove that cello crotch was a thing. Now, about 3 years ago, he and his wife decided, oh, well, we better come clean. And so they actually told the Lancet, we lied. This was all made up. And so the Lancet had to publish a retraction. Now, the reason I tell you that is because obviously he was a brand guy, he was a marketing guy, and brand and marketing guys tend to be fairly frivolous. And this is one of the problems, because if you actually look at the AMC community, when they look at brand marketing commercial people, they're a bit suspicious about the whole thing. And I think culturally, AMCs, particularly outside of America, are not really culturally attuned to some of the things we just heard about in the panel. And before I give my final couple of comments, I want to say thank you to all of our panellists in both panels and our keynotes. I thought they were all fantastic. Really great to see. That discussion there was great about the need for collaboration and how it all works together. Because it seems to me that there are 2 points here. One is our research, I double-checked, our research does not ask any questions about the ability of AMCs to manage themselves commercially, to extract value out of the valuable IP they create, including licensing or use of their brand for various reasons that would be beneficial to their objectives and to the healthcare market. We don't ask any questions, but my hunch would be that apart from some pretty hard-nosed AMCs in America, there is a general cultural rejection of this kind of stuff. They don't really want to be involved with it. And I think it bears great scrutiny. The AMCs owe it to themselves, following Roger's remarks and the other remarks. They need to look closely at how they actually get into the economics, get into the commercials, how they actually extract value for what they're doing in order to plough it back into the system to make more money. I really think there's a huge, screaming opportunity there, which will help healthcare. So that would be my first thing. Now, obviously, I like that because we're here to help advise them how to do that kind of thing, in particular with brands, but generally with the way in which they license their IP. So that would be my first remark. And maybe over the next year, for the next year's study, we'll look at that and see how good they are at commercial exploitation. My second comment was I kicked off with all those mad statistics about how much it all costs. One of the interesting questions is whether AMC activity and the development of AMC activity inevitably drives up the cost of healthcare. Because logically, if you've got people doing great AMC research and great research into all manner of different medical procedures, why shouldn't their research be driving down the cost? There was a guy that worked for us at Brand Finance who went off and did an MBA, and he ended up working in DeepMind as I think he's the head of staff or something to Demis Hassabis, who's the Nobel Prize winning lead, founder of DeepMind. And I know that they used AI to crack something or other complicated to do with proteins in something. And apparently that's driven down the cost of finding cures for various different diseases. Well, right that large across the whole medical world, we heard earlier on that the difference in cost between doing cataracts in India and somewhere else was massively different. Why can't AMCs be there, yes, to make more money commercially, but also drive down the cost and improve the outcome? It seems as though everyone thinks it will only ever drive up the cost. So that would be my second comment. And I think all of that requires that the people who are running AMCs, and I'm sure there are many who are very commercial, should be doing things like supporting companies through the valley of death, thinking about how they can, muck in, collaborate. And it will be very interesting to revisit this subject next year. So those would be my remarks, the remarks of someone who is not really a medical type person, but more looking at it from a business point of view, but a business point of view which can be good for the whole medical world. And so I'd like to thank you all for coming. I hope you'll join us and have something to eat. And I hope you take a look at our study. There's an awful lot there that we haven't shown you today. I think it's all online, but if you want to know more, let us know. And look forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much.